Greetings, kindred. We're going to continue our study of the book of Ezekiel. We're in chapter 17. We're going to cover verses 22 through 24, which will conclude this chapter 17 of the book of Ezekiel. Okay, let's get started. Yahweh told Ezekiel, his watchman, to put forth a riddle and speak a parable unto the house of Israel. He did not make the parable difficult at all to understand, and even had Ezekiel explain its meaning in very simple terms, just to be sure we all got it. And what was the parable about? Verses 9 through 10 and 15 through 21 clearly show that it was about the prosperity of one's actions during the reign and captivity of the king of Babylon. The obvious point is that Yahweh, through his words spoken by Jeremiah the prophet, warned the people and their leaders exactly what was going to happen. The futile attempts by Zedekiah to circumvent the plan that our father already laid out were brought to naught and caused him great pain and suffering. We are now left with 3 verses 22 through 24 in parable format, written as an allegory without any further explanation of the symbology, but with the conclusion of the matter plainly stated by our Father, the simple riddle being thus solved. Let us examine the last 3 verses. Ezekiel 17, verse 22. Thus saith Yahweh Elohim, I will also take of the highest branch of the high cedar, and will set it. I will crop off from the top of its young twigs a tender one, and will plant it upon a high mountain and eminent. I will also take is in contrast to the first parable, because here Yahweh Elohim himself is taking of the highest branch, whereas in verse 3, it was man, the great eagle, who took of the highest branch. The tender one is to be planted upon a high mountain, which the next verse will show to be Mount Zion, is the same one spoken of by Isaiah in chapter 53. Eminent means to elevate, and we will see this tender one exalted in verse 24. Here is that tender plant spoken of by Isaiah. Isaiah 53, verse 2. For he shall grow up before him as a tender plant and as a root out of a dry ground. He hath no form nor comeliness, and when we shall see him, there is no beauty that we should desire him. Read the entire 53rd chapter of Isaiah, which describes the lowliness of Messiah. And since the subject of the parable is prosperity, notice particularly verse 10. Yahweh's way always prospers. Verse 10. And the pleasure of the Lord shall prosper in his hand. So where is this tender one to be planted? At the very top of the government of Almighty Elohim, symbolized by the mountain of the height of Israel, which is Mount Zion. Ezekiel 17:23. In the mountain of the height of Israel I will plant it, and shall bring forth boughs and bear fruit, and be a goodly cedar, and under it shall dwell all fowl of every wing, in the shadow of the branches thereof shall they dwell. All fowl of every wing means all people shall dwell under his branches. You see, only through this tender one can a person have eternal life. Well, how come these verses aren't referring to the daughter of Zedekiah, who was not killed by the king Nebuchadnezzar and was taken with her sister, along with the stone of scone, known as Jacob's pillar, to the shores of Ireland by Jeremiah, thus replanting the kingship line in the Isles of the West. Write for the booklet Jacob's Pillar by E. Raymond Capt for the details of this fascinating and easy to document history. The reason is because the next verse explains that we are talking about two trees, a haughty, arrogant one and a lowly, humble one. These are those same two trees from the beginning, even in the garden of Elohim, the tree of knowledge of the good and evil and the tree of life. Verse 24, and all the trees of the field shall know that I, the Lord, have brought down the high tree, have exalted the low tree, have dried up the green tree, and have made the dry tree to flourish. I, Yahweh, have spoken and have done it. The high, haughty tree, Satan as the instead of Christ, will be brought down at the return of the low, humble tree, Yeshua Christ, who will be exalted as the King of kings and Lord of lords, and under whose authority all people shall dwell forevermore. Here are the definitions of high and low from Strong's Concordance. High, Gaboah, Hebrew 1364, or fully Gabawa, from Hebrew 1361, Gabah, elevated or elated, powerful, arrogant, haughty, height, high, higher, lofty, proud, exceeding proudly. Okay, the definition for low, shafal, Hebrew 82:17, from Hebrew 82:13, shafel, depressed, literal or figurative, base, basest, humble, low, or lower, lowly. And all the trees of the field, i.e., every single individual, shall know it was the Yahweh's doing. We will soon be studying the 31st chapter of Ezekiel, which explains so well what trees are symbolic of in the Bible. Of course, no one is going to write to us and contest that the trees and branches and twigs in chapter 17 of Ezekiel are anything other than people, and the same will be true of the 31st chapter of this book. And no one disputes that the tree of life in Revelation is anyone other than Yeshua Christ, but they will argue until they are blue in the face that the tree that was in the midst of the garden, whose fruit produces nothing but pain and heartache and death, had apples on it. Here is what and who that tree in Eden was. Ezekiel 31:3. Behold, the Assyrian was a cedar in Lebanon, with fair branches and with a shadowing shroud, and of a high stature, and his top was among the thick boughs. There is a note in the Companion Bible regarding this word Assyrian, which actually means box cedar. It is symbolic, as you will see, of Satan, who wanted to be a great fir tree, like our Father calls himself in Hosea 14, verse 8. Quote, Ephraim shall say, what have I to do any more with idols? I have heard him and observed him. I am like a green fir tree. From me is thy high fruit found. Quote, you will get your fruit from him, not from the tree in the midst of the garden, not from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Verse 4, the waters made him great. The deep set upon him on high, with her rivers running round about his plants, and sent out her little rivers unto all the trees of the field. All these same trees of the field, who we just read of in Ezekiel 17, verse 24, are going to see this brought down, and they are going to know it was Yahweh who did it. Verse 5. Therefore, his height was exalted above all the trees of the field, and his boughs were multiplied, and his branches became long, because of the multitude of waters when he shot forth. Verse 6. All the fowls of heaven made their nests in his boughs, and under his branches did all the beasts of the field bring forth their young, and under his shadow dwelt all great nations. He exalted himself and became world ruler, the king of Babylon. Confusion. Even in the world that then was before Yahweh overthrew him the first time. He is coming again as world ruler and high priest, the Antichrist or the instead of Christ, and Yahweh will overthrow him and bring him down again. Verse 7. Thus was he fair in his greatness, in the length of his branches, for his root was by great waters. Verse 8. The cedars in the garden of Elohim could not hide him. The fir trees were not like his boughs, and the chestnut trees were not like his branches, nor any tree in the garden of Elohim was like unto him in his beauty. Verse 9. I have made him fair by the multitude of his branches, so that all the trees of Eden that were in the garden of Elohim envied him. Any question about who trees are? They are persons. Let's repeat the last verse of Ezekiel 17. Verse 24. And all the trees of the field shall know that I, Yahweh, have brought down the high tree, have exalted the low tree, have dried up the green tree, and have made the dry tree to flourish. I, the Lord, have spoken and have done it. I want to stop here for a minute. It just occurred to me, you know how we have in the liberal movement this green movement? I wonder if there's any connection to the green tree. Okay, I digress. Let's continue. What is this green tree and dry tree? A green tree is a living tree, and a dry one is dead. This refers to Yeshua Christ, who used this very same analogy concerning himself as he walked to his crucifixion. Luke 23, verse 28. But Yeshua, turning unto them, said, Daughters of Jerusalem, weep not for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. He was teaching even as he marched to his death. 29. For behold, the days are coming, in the which they shall say, Blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bare, and the paps which never gave suck. His bride is supposed to be a virgin when he comes to marry her, but unfortunately, many will be seduced, impregnated in their minds by someone else who they think is their husband. And I might also add, not only are they impregnated in their minds, but many will be impregnated by someone that is not of their kind. For remember, Yahweh's way is kind after kind. Okay, let's continue. In other words, they will think that Satan, soon coming as the instead of Christ, is in fact the real Yeshua Christ. They are supposed to wait and remain virgins. Verse 30. Then shall they begin to say to the mountains, Fall on us, and to the hills, cover us. They will be so ashamed when the real bridegroom shows up and they are nursing someone else's baby. And Lance says this is a spiritual allegory, but I think it's probably also a true allegory. Verse 31, For they do these things in a green tree. What shall be done in the dry? If they crucified Christ while he was yet alive in the flesh, what will they do when he's gone away? He already answered that. So what then is the riddle of Ezekiel chapter 17? Actually, it was summed up in the words of our Father at the conclusion of the lesson. Ezekiel 17, verse 24. I, the Lord, have spoken and have done it. Okay, so you see, the word of Yahweh declares that the king of Babylon is coming to take the house of Israel captive once again in this final generation. Many preachers and ministers are running around telling people not to worry and that they are safe and secure because Yahweh is going to take them up in the rapture mobile and they won't be taken captive. Sorry, pal, it ain't so. We are going into captivity. The religious leaders lied to the people back then, and they continue in their ignorance to lie to the people today. That which is written shall happen exactly as it is written. That is what the Lord meant. I have spoken it, and I have done it. Whatever he does prospers. If we go against his plan, shall it prosper? Having your eyes put out is not my definition of prosperity. We are to see and understand that the sequence of events in chapter 17 goes directly from the captivity, which was a type for us today, to the restoration of the kingdom of Elohim. The parable, therefore, concerning the actions of Yahweh's people is written for us in this final generation, for we who are going into captivity and face the king of Babylon. The example has already been set forth. We can either understand and do things Yahweh's way, or we can try to circumvent the plan of Yahweh. The king of Babylon will come and he will prosper because it is Yahweh's will. You can either be part of the plan or you will quickly become part of the problem. Remember that the Apostle Paul wrote in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 that the son of perdition is coming before we gather back to Yeshua Christ, and he will deceive the whole world, causing the great apostasy by sitting in the temple of Yahweh, claiming that he is Yahweh, that he is Yeshua Christ. Is it going to happen exactly that way? Because it has been Yahweh's plan from the beginning. The coming king of Babylon shall prosper during his reign. Daniel records it for us too. Daniel 11, verse 32. And as such as do wickedly against the covenant, shall he corrupt by flatteries. But the people that do know their Elohim shall be strong and do exploits. Go against the plan of Yahweh, and you will suffer the consequences. Zedekiah learned the hard way. We don't have to. Those who know their Yahweh and his word will prosper. Verse 36. And the king shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every Elohim, and shall speak marvelous things against the Elohim of Elohims, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished, for that is determined shall be done. That is determined shall be done? No ifs, ands, or buts. It shall be done. Okay, that concludes the chapter 17 of Ezekiel. And we'll start next time with a new chapter of Ezekiel, chapter 18. Okay, you all have a blessed day. Yahweh bless.